Okay,
There you go.
so we are all set and recording. Jane and Sal from Ascension, I don't want to step on your toes too much. Just want to thank you guys for coming here and putting on this webinar for us. So Jane, I'm going to pass it off to you if you want to go ahead and do the formal introduction, and then you can hand it off to Sal. Again, thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Jane Shane. I'm a registered nurse with Ascension Southeast Michigan in the Community Health Department. And I'd like to welcome Salvatore Russo from Behavioral Health from the Eastwood Clinic. Sal is a supervisor and counselor with Eastwood Clinics in Clinton Township. So we welcome Sal here to speak about mourning the loss of a smile. So thank you, Sal, for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jane, and thanks for having me. It's you know, I love being a part of these things. It's always an honor that someone wants to hear what I have to say, you know. So I appreciate the opportunity, and plus, I think it opens up another venue for a conversation of mental health issues and just kind of open up a dialogue of how we're all feeling. So welcome to the Mourning the Loss of a Smile. If you guys, I don't know how it might work, but I might want to mute yourself, although I haven't heard anyone, so I don't think you can even be heard. But if you have questions, we can get to those separately. You can maybe take a side note of them or, you know, jot them down. There's also a little dialogue box that you guys can share information from. See if I can move this out of the way, maybe down here.
Yes, we can take the questions at the end of the presentation. And if anyone has questions, you can put it into the chat.
There you go.
And I will monitor the chat and pose those questions to Sal at the end of the presentation.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jane. Let's see. All right. Click to go on. Okay. So the presentation, or what we're going to be speaking about, is the effects of being isolated and kind of the loss of a smile, and which is an interesting topic, especially relevant at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Just mourning the loss of a smile, it has, you know, several meanings. One was the loss of a smile, the obvious kind of physical sense of we all had to put masks on, and just kind of that oddness and feeling of walking around the grocery store and not, you know, saying hello to someone. And of course, there was that obvious effect of losing a smile. And then also, you know, when you're sad or when you're not feeling well or depressed or blue, that sort of thing as it relates to the loss of a smile. So about me, my name is Sal Russo. I am a clinical supervisor at Ascension Eastwood Clinics in Clinton Township. Eastwood Clinics has been around. It's been a part of Ascension for, I don't know, 30 years. It's been a long time. We, you know, behavioral health. So we're often kind of, if you know us, you know, and you rely on us and you trust us. If you haven't heard of us, it's because we're behavioral health, I suppose. But so there's actually like 10 outpatient clinics all throughout Metro Detroit, including a recovery center that helps men in recovery, getting clean from drugs and alcohol. So my site's over at 16 in Garfield. We have like 15 therapists and a couple psychiatrists. You know, it's a nice little medium-sized practice. And we treat mild to moderately affected people for mental health issues. And substance abuse issues, of course, too. Children to older adults. I've been doing this for a little while now. I've been kind of in all levels of treatment, be that in residential treatment. I've been worked for a while at inpatient mental health. I've worked outpatient settings like I'm currently in. I've worked intensive outpatients, which is a more intensive treating of substance use disorders. I've jack of all trades, I suppose, right? And recently I've been working as a clinical supervisor here at Clinton Township for the last couple of years here now. Before that life, I was in restaurant management and training. So that was a completely different shift. But for 15 years, I trained and opened restaurants for Buffalo Wild Wings specifically. But nonetheless, always been training, always been presenting. It's definitely a passion of mine. So I hope you guys get something out of the presentation, whether it's something you've learned or maybe a reflection you've made on yourself. Maybe it is something that you can pass on to someone else. But so then, I should have presented it differently, but that's okay. So in this picture, you have someone wearing a mask, and we all probably see different things in this person, right? For myself, what I see is, I recall when part of my role was to round at St. John Ross and talk to some of the associates to see how they're feeling. And the first time that I remember the mask and the effects is when I asked my manager, how am I supposed to convey happiness or gratitude or sadness when half my face is being covered? And so we kind of talked through that. And the suggestion back then was that you can still convey your emotions with your face being covered. You can still give a sort of energy of empathy or understanding or, sadness, even when your face is covered. And I think that's even true here for this person here. I think you can see she's smiling. You can see it in her eyes. But again, everyone's experience with the mask has been very different. For some people, it might be a piece of thing that makes you feel safe and comforted. For other people, it might be a nuisance or something that, the government is making me do and I don't want to do it. It just has so many different meanings, this mask. Yeah. So the effects of being isolated, therefore, are also going to be very unique to the individual. So isolation has had profound effects on our American psyche. In the beginning of the pandemic, I did some research related to a different thing because I was really curious to find out in other big events how what were the psychological effects of these other big events. So I looked into, say, September 11th. I looked into the swine flu, to Ebola breakouts. And it's interesting to note that, because research always comes out after these events, right? And it was interesting to note in all these events that the effects, the psychological effects of these big national or country events are also always measured later. The main concern is obviously the effects of, say, September 11th or the effects of the Ebola outbreak, or, and then later we start to study the psychological implications, Obviously, during September 11th, that's a good example where we are obviously concerned about our nation's security, concerned about obviously the physical destruction, the loss of life there. It wasn't until later that we started to discover, the cancer that the firemen were getting, the PTSD from the first responders or the people there. So suffice it to say that the psychological impacts of COVID and what we've gone through, they're going to be coming out, right? Anecdotally, we've seen, anecdotally means there's no science to back it up, right? Anecdotally means we can see this, we can observe there's problems happening, but there's no scientific research to support these arguments. So what we are seeing at the ground level is increased routine, quote unquote, ER visits. So more people are showing to the ER, aside from the height of the pandemic, but domestic violence was increasing during this pandemic, during the lockdown in particular. Suicide rates increased during this time. And interestingly enough, also the time between a person's thought they're going to hurt themselves and then the actual suicide attempt is decreasing. So that's particularly alarming. So people are acting quicker on these thoughts. We're seeing an increase in anxiety disorders, in particular obsessive compulsive disorders, related to germs and that sort of thing. And then an increase in substance use concerns. Tons of people have been relapsing and struggling with drug use. People, first timers too, where, I have more time. A lot of people, it's like, I'm not drinking because I got to go to work Monday through Friday. Suddenly, I'm at home Monday through Friday. So a lot of people knew developing drinking issues. And so So the effects of social isolation and our loss of a smile are profound. Granted, we don't have the research to support this, but we are seeing them all over in the mental health setting. We're seeing them at the hospital. We're seeing them spiritually too. The spiritual effects of this, people are crying out and wanting to go to church, which is, different than what some people were before, right? So some warning signs of yourself. If you feel like the isolation is getting to you, some things you might have seen, some things that you're seeing, perhaps. You might have had increased irritability. You might have had sleep or eating patterns changing. Feelings of boredom, that's an interesting symptom of depression. There's a lot of growing research on that. We often think boredom is just boredom. I'm bored, I have nothing to do. But a lot of times boredom is a less severe form of depression, and it has been associated with depressive disorders. So differentiating between normal boredom and clinical boredom is obviously very difficult because a lot of times you're bored. But anyway, that's an interesting one. Of course, depression, anxiety, or fear are all symptoms or signs that you might be, the effects of isolation are wearing on you. Yeah. So the effects obviously again can be different from person to person. How it's impacted society is going to be coming out here shortly. I'm looking forward to some of those. Hopefully we learn from these things and can grow from them. So here's some kind of tips. I do feel like there is hope ahead with this isolation. We've seen the numbers come down. We've seen it seems like vaccinations have been working. These emergency orders I think are being lifted in mid-July here. So that seems promising. So it feels like there's hope coming, right? Just a little quick mention on hope. Hope is a very researched thing in psychology. Hope is often I'll give you a good example. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a community support group for people who are struggling with drinking issues, they have this thing called the 12 steps to recovery. And there's been a lot of research on the 12 steps because it's been shown to be effective for people struggling with alcoholism. So in this study, they asked participants, what has been the most salient, the most helpful thing in AA? And you might think it has to do with God, because God is all throughout AA. God is mentioned, and as a higher power is mentioned all throughout AA. So the person might think, well, God or spirituality is what helps you in recovery. But what this research has consistently shown is that what helps people in recovery, what helps people with AA, is the notion of hope. This feeling that things will get better. The belief that if I keep trying, if I keep fighting, everything is going to be okay. So hope is a very, very helpful thing. It's been very much so researched. So hope is ahead. These bullet points, just some quick ones I thought of to help isolation and loss of a smile if you're feeling that way. Of course, the first thing to always note is consult with your doctor. If you're feeling like, oh man, I might be feeling a little blue, or I might be feeling a little depressed, anxious, or whatever happens to be, talk to your doctor. These doctors are fantastic now at coordinating with mental health, or speak to a clergy member, a spiritual leader, a friend, and they can help point you in the right direction. If you feel like the symptoms are getting so bad you need clinical intervention, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone, any mental health clinic. Your insurance will help you. But some other tips are, it's okay to smile and talk to yourself. And I put in quotations sparingly. There's actually been research on this as well, that talking to yourself out loud in some capacity is okay. Now, that limit of where talking to yourself is bad is it's you don't want to be talking to yourself all the time, but it is okay sometimes to talk to yourself because it helps to hear what you're thinking sometimes. Again, consult with local health experts or Because there might be social engagements that are going on that you can get involved in. Excuse me. You can journal. You can write a friend or neighbor. In other contexts, I've suggested you can actually write people incarcerated, which is a pretty cool thing, but be cautious when you're writing any stranger, whether they be incarcerated or not. These folks are isolated as well. Remember, this too shall pass. That's kind of a hopeful statement. Pray, meditate, reflect with a spiritual friend. Here's another big bullet point. I was talking to my cousin who's a doctor, and one thought that him and I were talking about is we should probably start rethinking the idea of social distancing. I think some people have interpreted social distancing to mean social isolation. And I'm a firm believer that you can physically distance while not being socially isolative, if that makes sense. Very wordy, but think that through, right? People think social distance, stay in my home and stay away from people, which isn't always the case. You can, especially with the weather nice now, you can go and have a full-on 2-hour hangout with a friend and still be physically distanced, still be safe if you're being cautious. So try to challenge those thoughts in yourself between social distancing, physical distancing, and what you can do while remaining safe. So social isolation, the effects of the masking, the impact of all these things are very specific to the individual, very specific to what you're going through, but there are some common warning signs you can look out for. People you can talk to, I think that's common. And also to note that we're all going through this. This is a universal thing. So feel free to talk to someone about it, because we've all experienced the uniquely, the uniquely the same thing. I'll speak on that for a moment, right? 1220. It's very rare in society that the whole world goes through this global phenomenon. We had, say for instance, like World War II, different countries' experience of it was very different depending on what country you're in. If you're in a country where the war was actually there on the soil, that experience is going to be very different than, say, in the United States, where maybe your dad or your brother is off fighting, but the war isn't in your quote unquote backyard. So people's experiences of these world issues are often very different. But what's very cool in this context is that we're all uniquely going through the same experience in the world, slightly different, of course, but that's a beautiful thing. And that we can all grow from this too, in a large way. We can all come through this together, having learned some beautiful things. Hopefully there's less division at the end of the day. Time will tell, I suppose. So the next portion of social isolation and the effects is just generally having a healthy mind. Now, this portion gets a bit philosophical, so bear with me here. Bear with me. So we're going to define the mind, and we're going to define historically what it means. We're going to look at some definitions. We might look at some clinical examples of a healthy and non-healthy mind. We're going to look at some clinical theories with examples of maintaining a healthy mind, and specifically reality therapy. So again, we might get a little philosophical, a little heavy, but I try to keep it as light as possible. So what is a healthy mind? I hope you can hear this video. I didn't test this. So I thought I think what's most interesting about what is a healthy mind is illustrated here in my little nephew, Sal. He shares a name of mine. Let's see if you can hear it. Hopefully you can.
What is a healthy mind? Yeah.
I don't know yet.
Just make up a guess. Good job.
So if you couldn't hear it, I asked him what a healthy mind is, and he said, I don't know, food. And granted, he's 4, but I do think that illustrates some of the. Anyways, this event was at we had a little get together for, what was it for? I forget what it was for. A birthday, I'm sure, or something like that. And I asked everyone around the table about, like, you know, a couple adults, a couple kids, what is a healthy mind? And everybody had a different answer. And I think that illustrates the complexity of first answering what is a mind. So bear with me. I'll try to breeze through this
What is a healthy mind?
philosophy stuff. So the mind-body dilemma has been going on for years. You know, there's this thing called substance dualism, and that's popularized by Rene Descartes. He thinks that minds are separate, non-physical things that cannot be explained or redacted to physical things like the brain. So there's two separate things, mind and body are separate, right? Then there's reductive physicalism, and they believe that the world is entirely made up of physical matter, including our brains and minds. So our mind could be best explained by neurotransmitters, sodium, potassium pumps, neurons, all sorts of clinical jargon that even I don't know what it means, right? There's another view that epiphenomenalism is that physical states can give rise to mental states, but mental states can't affect physical states. So your beliefs, desires, temperaments do exist, but they have no power over anything physical about you. So these three already, again, philosophy 101, right, is a crash course on how defining what a healthy mind is again, often difficult, because defining what you think the mind is, where it resides, is very different. You know, I might ask my mom what's a healthy mind, and she might say her experience has been her mother, my grandma, had Alzheimer's. So for her idea of a healthy mind is to do Sudoku puzzles and crosswords and read and pray so that you can keep your mind sharp. Because her experience has told her that my mom did not keep her mind sharp, and that's why she had Alzheimer's. And so everyone's answer is always very different. So let's go on to a little more philosophy. Here's my favorite one. Mysterianism. Ooh, I like that one. So there's this guy, what's his name? Colin McGinn. Yeah, Colin McGinn. So Mysterianism believes that no amount of reflection can lead us to claims about neurons firing, and no amount of empirical research is going to give rise to what it's like to see the color blue. And I love that because, you know, I work with tons of clients. You know, that's my job, right? I talk to people, you know, to put it simply. And what we often find out is a lot of these people, a lot of these clients, those struggling with mental health issues, are just phenomenally bright. They're smart. They're leaders in their field. They're educated. They're intelligent. They're all sorts of great things. And they sometimes come to us frustrated. And you hear this frequently. I just had a client where he's like, I'm very mechanically inclined. You put something in front of me and I can fix it. I can fix a car. I can fix anything. And I know these types of guys, right? Or these types of people. And he's like, I'm just frustrated. I can fix anything, but I can't fix a mind. I can't fix my head. I don't know what's wrong with me. And he's really beating himself up, right? And I think the answer to that is in part in this quote here. The reason why it's hard to do that is because in some ways, the amount of reflection he can have, he can't figure himself out. He can't read a manual on himself. Even reading books sometimes doesn't help, right? So I just think that's beautiful. Another philosophical, what is the mind body, is the mind and body are constantly interacting, affecting each other, interactionism. And then of course, there's this notion of qualia. I'm almost done, bear with me if you're still there listening. So qualia is an interesting phenomenon. It's just subjective first person experience. Like I gave the example of my mom. So in counseling, you hear this all the time, right? Someone says, I asked someone, well, how was your childhood? It was great. You know, my dad was a great supporter. My mom was always there for me, and she helped me on my homework. In my head, I hear my dad was a great supporter, and that might mean to me that he's there on the foot of my bed, sitting and talking to me about girl problems I'm having, or talking about that bully that took my lunch bag. That might be what I'm thinking as the therapist, but the client might be presenting their dad was a good supporter in that their dad went to work, he paid the bills, he had dinner on the table, and he was always there at dinner on time. So anyways, the point is that people's subjective first person experiences influence how they think a healthy mind could be. So some thoughts of takeaways. Where do you think the mind resides? What do you think is a healthy mind? You know, so social isolation and masking and COVID has led to how do I keep my mind healthy, has led to what were the impacts that this had on you, and also how do you keep a healthy mind? So here's my thoughts on a healthy mind. Well, actually, not mine. I asked my nephew Luke, who's another smart little guy. He's, what is he, 9 or 10? You know, he's wise beyond his years, I'd say. But here's what he thinks a healthy mind is.
Luke, what is a healthy mind?
Where your brain can like decide whether something's a bad decision or a good decision.
Okay, thank you.
So I asked Luke, what do you think a healthy mind is? And he says that it's when your brain can make a decision of what is a good or bad decision. Interesting. So again, a million different thoughts at that table, but so I expanded on his beliefs, and we go from philosophy 101 to now psychology. But this one includes some tips and strategies, so bear with me here. So reality therapy is founded by William Glasser. He has this simple idea, just like Luke's thought, was that we only have the power to make choices for ourselves and limited power to control others. So our basic human needs in a healthy and a happy, healthy mind are met by survival, love and belonging, fun, freedom, independence, and power and achievement. So, you know, this little illustration helps to kind of show what that looks like, you know. Basic survival needs like food and water. So these are really healthy tips that a psychologist or counselor might use when in therapy. So a person might think that they have no ability for basic human needs. Like in this instance, I'm isolated in my house, so I have no sense of power. I'm locked away. I have no control over others, or you know, I'm just locked up here. So a counselor might look at these other steps, these other rather fingers of the hand, and see what we can work on. So we might work on this need to have fun. Maybe a person who's locked away in their house can still have fun. Granted, no one's locked in the house. They might think they're locked in the house, but so maybe we might look at how does a person who feels isolated in their home, how can they have fun by themselves? How do we help this person to feel loved? How do we have to help this person to find new friends or to continue to socialize with friends? So this is how we keep a healthy mind in reality therapy, by exploring these needs and trying to grow them in the person. Here's another good example of reality therapy and healthy mind. So for instance, you can use this tool yourself for something that you want. So you can do this to yourself. WDEP stands for want, doing, evaluate, and plan. So you might look at one of the basic human needs of a healthy mind, and you might examine, you know, the objectives at fostering this healthy mind. So I want, let's think of an example for a healthy mind. I want to talk more to my sister, Sarah. So you go through this want, doing, evaluating, planning. So what do you want to accomplish? Well, I want to talk to my sister, Sarah, and this might help me to feel more connected to her. I haven't felt connected to her through this pandemic. What am I doing about this to get what I want? Well, currently I'm doing nothing. So I'm willing to call her at least once a week And I think that's safe for me, and that'll keep us both safe, and that'll help me to feel connected to her. Evaluating this is calling Sarah going to help me to truly get what I want? Then you examine that. What I want from connecting to Sarah is to have a better relationship with her, so that way, you know, we used to be best friends when we were kids. We've had a falling out when mom and dad died, and I want to make sure that our kids will have a good relationship. So I sit back and evaluate. Will talking to Sarah really help this? It may or may not. She might not want her kids to talk anyways, but I'm going to continue with it anyways. So then you go on to plan. What is my plan to fulfill this want and need? So this is something that a counselor might do or a psychologist might do with a client. They might not do it so obviously, but this is something that we work through in our head to kind of evaluate and plan for someone's strategy. And you can also use this tool for a healthy mind. So, yeah. So what is a healthy mind? The summary is, you know, where the mind resides is obviously very confusing. It's been a debate for lots of years since Socrates, right? We've been debating where the mind resides. The most important part is you defining what you think the mind is will help you to understand what you think a healthy mind is. Where the mind is defines what a healthy mind is. Reality therapy is one example we looked at in choice theory for meeting our basic human needs. I presented that one tool to examine what you're thinking you might do to have a healthy mind. And positive psychology is in the next slide, but go away. So yeah, so far, where have we been? We've talked about the effects of social isolation and wearing a mask and how that impacts people differently. We've talked about the healthy mind and how, again, how that can be subjective, but we've given you some tools that you might be able to use to have a healthier mind. Next, we're going to talk about staying positive and building resiliency through healthy habits. So again, I'm going with this theme of asking people what they think. And this is probably the smartest person I know. This is my daughter, she's 4. And I asked her about positivity.
If you think about good stuff, you'll be good.
So she couldn't even turn away from her morning television and breakfast, but for her, staying positive is if you think about good stuff, you'll be good, which there's actually quite a bit of research on that topic. And there's actually a whole field of psychology related to this topic called positive psychology. So positive psychology studies what makes life most worth living. It's beautiful. It's a really cool subsect of psychology. I wish it was a little more popular, but it focuses on societal and individual well-being. Been lots of great research on these things and well-being and what makes people happy. It's relatively new, 1998. So it's a reaction against this past practice, which focused more on mental illness as a maladaptive behavior and negative thinking. So meaning previously it was like client presents because they're depressed. So everything from a psychology perspective came from this notion that people have this maladaptive behavior. They're isolating, they're not eating. It's always like negative things and negative thinking. This takes a look at the root and the beginning of instead coming from positivity as opposed to maladaptive negative behavior. So Martin Seligman writes this PERMA model of well-being. This is what he suggests people have in them to be positive, to think positive. You would have positive emotion, you would have relationships, a sense of accomplishment, engagement, and meaning. And he elaborates on what these all mean. I don't want to read them all, And the slide and this recording is available to you. And also in his book, I cited it there. One interesting thing that he talks about, slightly different than reality therapy previously mentioned, is this notion of engagement. And engagement he describes as this notion of like flow, having flow in something. And the way I best describe flow is that feeling when you're completely engulfed in an activity and you just feel like you're in the moment. All you're thinking about is that moment. Some people get it when they're golfing, playing tennis, running. Some people get it when they're writing or drawing. Other people get it when they're like doing dishes, that feeling again, where you're just completely focused on this one thing, this feeling of flow. And he says we get this when we do things we truly enjoy and care about. We begin to engage completely with the present moment and enter the state of being known as flow. Very cool. I like this one a lot because you can enter the state of flow with no one around you. You can enter the state of flow with no social interaction, right? You could do it on your own. And I think finding that is really powerful. And it's anyone, someone with limited mobility might be able to could probably find something that they have that experience of flow in. So really cool thought. So how you might use this in your own life as a listener that I'm speaking to is you might look at these components, the PERMA model, and look how your needs are being met in your personal life. So again, you might not have all of these components of what Martin Seligman suggests would add to a good well-being, a positive well-being, but you might have some of them, right? We might not have the best relationships with people, but we might have a significant amount of meaning in our life, So taking a look at all these components and seeing how you can foster, how you can develop, how you can grow these in your life is really important for well-being. Here's another tip and tool. He believes, and I believe too, that learned optimism is integral to a healthy mind. So we all have heard of, well, maybe not all of us, but there's this thing called learned helplessness. And there's been a lot of research into that. You put 2 rats in a cage, right? You shock both rats, right? You're shocking the rats. You're pretty much torturing these poor rats. Rats, sucks to be a rat in this world, but you're torturing these poor rats and they're stuck in this cage. And, the one rat you left the door open for, so he can come and get out of the cage as much as he wants, right? He's shocked. Often he'll leave the cage because I'm getting shocked. The other rat has a closed-in capture, right? So later you open both of their doors and they shock them, and you find the rat that previously had his door closed will stay in his cage, continuing to be shocked. They believe that's an example of learned helplessness, that after we've gone through so much hardship, after we've gone through so much bad luck, we might learn that that is our fate and that is what it is. So he thinks the opposite to that is learned optimism. So there's a lot of depression symptoms like sad mood, loss of interest in life, weight loss, sleep disturbance, insomnia. I got them all listed here. And research on learned helplessness suggests that 8 out of 9 of these symptoms are also associated with clinical depression, which means that learned helplessness and depression they're interweaved, right? They have a lot of the same stuff going on. So what he proposes, that learned optimism is a strong protective factor against depression in a healthy mind, if you're following me still. So if you can learn to be optimistic, you can really fight off the symptoms of depression happening, like the way that like preventative medicine. Learned optimism is preventative medicine to depression. So what is learned optimism? That is the belief that, kind of like hope, that the belief that tomorrow will be better than today, believing that greater things are to come. You're persistent, you're cheerful, you're optimistic. The way we attach meaning to what is happening in our lives. We know that optimism is a muscle that can be developed. Some people say, well, fake it till you make it, right? So, often I'll tell clients, well, I want you every night to think of 3 positive things that have happened in your day. They can be anything. They can be, I had a really healthy lunch and that was positive. They can be anything. I had a good bowel movement. I don't know. It could be literally anything, like, to be optimistic about. We think that it has to be profound, but it doesn't have to be, to kind of get you in that flow and to get you in this understanding of optimism. And when you think about it, we do that all the time with negativity, right? I woke up and I stubbed my toe, and then my fridge, it was on the fritz. I had to call a repair guy. And then I go to work and my boss yelled at me. So our brains naturally connect negative things. That's what our brain does, is it's an amazing association machine. The problem is human brains tend to skew negative because that's often how we've learned survival. So opposite to that is learning optimism in the same way, connecting positive things that have happened in your life and doing that repetitively like a muscle. You can learn how to be optimistic in your life. I like this quote from him. People who believe themselves to be stupid rather than uneducated will not take the action needed to improve their mind. I love that. Optimism has nothing to do with intelligence. Yeah. So looking at time, I want to finish up with 10 minutes at least to spare. I'll try to go a little bit quickly through this. So this is an example of some negative versus positive thinking, right? And the example we're going to use is, say you have a flat tire. So the temporary thinking represents a positive way of thinking. A healthy-minded individual may think, I got a flat tire. This may set me back a few hours this morning. I should call into work and let them know I'll be a little late. Whereas someone that demonstrates permanent thinking, an unhealthy quote unquote mind might say, my life is ruined. This always happens to me. My week is going to be awful now. It's very permanent. Like, this event is going to permanently affect my whole week or life. Very permanent thinking. Pervasive thinking person, right? Pervasive thinking style. So healthy-minded person examining how widespread this flat tire is. Person might say positively, I guess I'll have to pack a few lunches this week to save up some money to account for this expense, but I'll do what I have to do. Someone that is real negative, thinking pervasively about their flat tire, might say, now I'm going to be late for work. My boss is going to lay into me. I'll probably get fired and won't be able to pay my bills again. So for them, the way that they're examining this flat tire, it's very pervasive. It's going to affect so many areas of their life. And then a way of looking at how personal is this flat tire to me, right? So a healthy-minded person might say, this is bad luck, I suppose. Things happen. Could have happened to anyone. Someone that maybe doesn't have such a positive mindset might say, this always happens to me. This is exactly how things go for me. They're personalizing it to them, that this flat tire somehow, this nail in the road, somehow like seeped their tire out. So you can use these tools, think temporary versus permanent, pervasive thinking, personalization thinking. You can use these tools and apply them to your day. So when you have an event, or you have a bad circumstance, when you're feeling isolated at home, when you're feeling like the loss of a loved one due to COVID, you can take a look at these things. How temporary or permanent am I making my thinking? How pervasive am I making my thinking? How personalized am I making this thinking? Additional tools from positive psychology, like I said, the positive thinking day and gratitude breaks are really cool. A really quick example, I always get stuck at this stupid light on the way to work. It seems to be that light is always red. I'm driving to work, I'm late, I'm early. This light always catches me. You cannot time it. And the light seems to take 10 years to change to green. I hate this light. The light is the bane of my existence, right? Now what I've come to do is when I get to this light, instead of having all these negative thoughts, I literally pause at the light and try to demonstrate some gratitude of my day or my life or my existence. So now I've made this light a 5-day-a-week reflection of my gratitude. And you can do that too. Designate a time or a space in your life where you can demonstrate gratitude. All right, summary. The psychological and physical impacts of the social isolation and the masking during a pandemic are not fully understood. Kind of be in tune yourself. Think of, how is this impacting me? Please, please, please reach out to your doctor, priest, spiritual leader, friend, family. Talk about this. These things are very universal, and someone else might be experiencing the same thing as you. Defining what a mind is and how to keep a healthy mind is very difficult and very subjective, very personal to who you are. So to do that, first start at identifying, what is a mind to me? Where does it reside? And then think, how do I have a healthy mind? I gave you some tips and some suggestions, but and hopefully you might be able to use them, but very subjective. And similarly, to develop resiliency and a positive and cheerful disposition, you might look towards positive psychology and the tips that Martin Seligman presented. I gave you a couple different tips, is gratitude breaks and positive thinking, and how learned optimism is really helpful when it comes to combating depression and sadness. So that is the end. I am winded and thirsty. I hope someone got something out of it. And if you have any questions, we'll take some time now.
I'm going to jump in. I don't have a question because you did such a nice job of explaining things, but COVID was, as an events professional, COVID was really weighing down on me, being isolated, and a lot of the things that you mentioned, I didn't even realize were internally happening. They were just kind of happening in the unconscious. And now that you've kind of brought light to it, it's like, oh, I kind of realized I was that irritable, and then kind of linking that over to the trained optimism. I think those are really interesting strategies, because definitely through COVID, there was a lot of "this always happens to me" thoughts going on. So that was really cool. I've just never thought of it that way. So thank you. I mean, it's a cool tip to take even beyond COVID, just the flat tire, the long line at the bank, all of that stuff. So
yeah,
those are very interesting points that it's never occurred to me.
Thank you. And that's the interesting thing about therapy. Often people, they're very simple steps or simple things, but people go like, that's so obvious. Why didn't I think of that? And it goes back to that thing of, it's hard to fix your own mind. So a therapist just kind of walk beside the person, like a shaman, or like a mentor. Or me say, hey, did you look at this thing over here? Did you consider this? And people often go like, that's so obvious. How did I miss that? And that's kind of what the role of a therapist is, to walk beside you as you figure it out.
I like that. That's a good way to frame it.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody's put any further questions into the chat, but maybe people are still thinking about it. Do you have any contact information that you'd like to share, or any places you'd like to send anybody with questions or to learn more?
I had that first slide there with all of our contact information. If you just Google Eastwood Clinics,
okay,
you can ask to talk to any site supervisor. They'll help you. And you can call and ask for Sal. I'll talk to you about any issue you might be having or any referral. I work at the Penn Township site. These Ascension docs, I can speak for them because I work with them. But they've been fantastic too at like making the appropriate referral. It's just been leaps and bounds difference over a couple of years so your doctor is always a great place to start if you have questions about how you've been feeling.
Cool. And if you are watching this on YouTube, if you look down in the comments, I will have posted lots of links and resources that Sal referenced, so it'll be easy to click through. So thanks again. Thanks again, Sal and Jane, for coming in and putting this together. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your summer. Thanks again so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'd like to chime in. My video was disabled, so I apologize for that. But I'd like to thank Sal for all of the information he provided in this very good presentation. I especially appreciate the tools that you have given us, that theory of reality and the examples that you showed, and following up with staying positive, building resilience, and fostering hope in that. And I think you're right, Sal. We need that hope to hold on to. and to know that we're not in this alone, that there are so many resources, there's so many people that you can reach out to that are available, and that I think we really don't think about it when we are in that moment or in that time frame of isolation and social distancing, that others are feeling the same way, you know, and that we really do have people to reach out to. And these types of ways of looking at our mind and using the tools in our toolbox to improve the way that our mindset is, whether it's negative or positive, and really looking at that learned optimism for a healthy mind, I think is so positive. So thank you for that. We all need that today.
Well said.
And really focusing on what we can do to improve. So thank you so much, Sal, for that.
Yeah, as,
I've,
you know, as
I've
much
taken,
as, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say,
love it. Thank
I
you.
thought you were done. I was just gonna say, you know, Sal, as much as I do love Buffalo Wild Wings, I feel like you're serving a much greater purpose here. So I'm happy you made the transition.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
again
so
so
much.
much. And then, yeah, we'll have information for you. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.